Hey folks, I'm Alan Furstenberg,
And hi, I'm Noble Ackerson,
and we are Two Voice Devs.
two voice devs.
Noble, fantastic to have you back on the show. Uh,
Honored to be back as
it
always.
it it feels like we are seeing each other an awful lot these days. Not just having you here on the show, but
Right.
by the time this airs, you and I are going to have been on on something for the Google developer groups,
Right.
where we're talking about current stuff with machine learning and AI. And then next week, you and I are going to both be speaking at Voice and AI in DC. So we finally get to meet up and see each other again after, what has it been, a good 4 or 5 years now at this point?
4 or 5 years. Yeah. I always sort of tack on an extra year because of the pandemic was a blur. So
Yeah, that whole
the
time period
error,
is kind of
the variance,
um,
the error margins are like, 6 months here and there.
so I thought it would be cool for us to talk about what we're going to be talking about at Voice and AI this year. You know, um, have you were you ever at the Voice conference in the past?
This will be my first voice conference, though. The organizer and I go way back during his MoDev days, and I did a Google Glass presentation, a designing for Glass talk at one of his events
Oh, that's cool. I
uh,
don't think I knew that.
a long time ago. Yeah. And we've been in touch ever since. And I just have never made it to any of his conferences since, even though it's right next door. I live in the DC metro region. So it's going to be
No,
my inaugural voice.
Pete's a
Yeah.
fantastic person to work with, and the MoDev team as a whole are great folks.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but for those that don't know, including you, this is the I think they're officially saying this is the fifth year of the Voice of what used to be known as the Voice Summit,
Hmm.
or this is the fifth anniversary of the Voice Summit, depending on how you want to count. Um, and in the past, last year it was held in DC as well, or just outside DC in Alexandria, Virginia. But in previous years, it was in Newark, New Jersey, which was
Oh,
an interesting choice. But it worked well, and it was those conferences. I only was able to attend one, but from what I heard, they were fantastic meeting places of ideas and creativity and just people coming out and learning what was going on with all of this technology. Certainly last year's Voice Summit was almost a reunion. It was everyone in the voice industry seeing each other for the first time after the pandemic. And this year I'm excited because we're kind of opening it up. We're saying, voice is bigger. It's it's generative AI, it's conversational AI, it's large language models, and all of this other stuff we're now understanding is part of it. So I'm excited to see the kind of crowd this brings in.
I contextualize it this way. I've had to, there's some intellectual humility that goes into having to accept that we need to sort of relearn and re-understand things that we probably should have understanding of already. And in the way you framed it just now makes a lot of sense, since a lot of what conversational AI experts did was to play on the strengths of natural language understanding. You had large models and decently sized data sets for those models to train. And it seems to be inverted now with new techniques where the data is massive and the models are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And for NLU to be a thing, so natural language understanding, which we use in voice to text to voice, to speech to text, like all audio synthesis and all that stuff, which practitioners have done for years, is always sort of being all just contracted with that switch of big model, small data, and now it's sort of flipped to big data, small model, or
Yeah.
decently sized model and all that stuff. So it's interesting how I've met no voice or conversational AI expert that isn't sort of relearning or re-understanding the new parlance and the new ways of generative AI. So
No, that's fair. But I also think at the same time, I feel like the generative AI crowd has a lot to learn from the lessons that the voice industry learned over the past 5, 7 or so years.
exactly.
That it's not enough to just say, yeah, we're just going to have this chatbot out there, and it just has a large language model behind it, and it's going to give you answers. Well, there's more to it than that. There's control, there's authentication, there's that sticky question of monetization.
Right, right.
There are all of these other things that are necessary. And then, you start saying, well, what is the user experience like? If the user has to wait 10 seconds for a reply, are they going to wait 10 seconds for a reply?
Right.
And I feel like these are lessons that the voice industry learned the hard way. And now we really want to help, the next generation of these two worlds that are coming together. I feel like we've got so much to learn from each other.
How do you feel the both, if you're looking at the communities sort of as monoliths, right? How do you feel? Has there been a sense of acceptance or just sort of convergence that you can observe where, one way to observe that is sort of, LinkedIn job title changes, and you can sort of see the linear growth of, conversational AI, generally generative AI, that sort of growth
I mean,
trajectory.
it's funny. The joke that's going around is, all of the blockchain folk turned into generative AI folk. Um, and I don't see that as true. Certainly the
I don't
people
see
who are
that. Yeah.
out there and really talking and doing real work,
Right.
some of them came from, some of them were dabbling in blockchain. This is true.
Right.
But most of them were either, had been doing AI for a long time, or had been doing voice and are merging into AI, or were quite frankly doing other things and now bringing those industry expertise into AI as well.
Yeah. Then you have the folks that, are the unicorns that are now working on conversational AIs powered by immutable ledgers or crypto, with that to generate, stable diffusion based NFTs.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like,
yeah, yeah.
so they have
Fortunately, I don't
all the
see many of those.
bingo
Yeah,
cards.
I was going to say the ones who are playing buzzword bingo, right? Um,
Exactly.
but I'm looking forward to seeing, exactly what this confluence comes up in the conference. I'm really excited to see what folks are bringing to the table and where we hammer out what the future is going to be.
I'm really excited for it. I'm really excited. So, Alan, I have to ask, what is your topic? Let's dive right in.
So
What is your topic? What are you going to be talking about?
so my topic's in some ways a new one for me, and in some ways it's one that I've talked about before. Um, I'm kind of I'm going to be taking my the project that I've been doing tons and tons of work with, LangChain and LangChain JS, and I'm going to be speaking about I think the subject of mine is something like open source AI advances to help developers help customers. And that's, if you know me, that's very much my kind of theme.
All right.
And I think the angle I'm going to be taking is, as you start building things, you're going to want to, you're starting with proofs of concept, and when you're building a proof of concept, you want to start with what's going to be my open source model? What can I do on the cheap? And then as you start bringing into, getting towards your minimum viable product, as you start scaling it up to handle more and more clients, you need to go into more and more enterprise of an angle. What I'm going to be talking about is LangChain is the foundation that you can do that with.
Hmm.
So you'll be using this open source software, LangChain and LangChain JS, And maybe you're going to start fiddling with, say Google's Maker Suite, or the OpenAI's free API,
Mhm.
or you're going to use, you've downloaded and somehow got to run as a server. We'll talk about that one another time. Uh, a Llama API.
Right.
So you might start fiddling with that locally, and you might want to pull in a vector database. And when you do, maybe you'll start with HNSW because that's free and open source. But as you are getting more and more sophisticated, you're going to need to pull in other resources and move towards an enterprise. You're going to want to start building on Azure. You're going to want to start building on Vertex AI, Google's Vertex AI. And the good news is that you're going to be able to keep using LangChain to do that. So you're going to have this open source core throughout your product lifecycle. And that's kind of the angle I'm going. So acknowledge the fact that some things you're going to want to keep using open source for, other things you may want a commercial service for, and of course you're going to need your own in-house code. You're going to need to do some work here.
All right.
Where's the balance in all of those? How do you find that balance? And then how do you use your own code and open source and LangChain so you don't have vendor lock-in, so that you
Right.
can say, these are my broad goals. What are the best tools right now? And when there are better tools later, how do I move to those tools? So
I
that's going to
hope you
be,
do dive in. Is it, with example, I'm very curious about, those, what we used to call MLOps frameworks, right? Machine learning operations frameworks that were, that talk to all of the major, platforms and services out there, and acted sort of as the meta orchestrator between all of those tools. So through, if you wanted to sort of, containerize code before serving,
mhm.
across different environments, you had, your system sort of pick up your CI/CD workflow and just hand it to Kubeflow, and then hand it to the next thing, and you'd have an audit trail behind that. Do you find, and I hate to sort of,
Well, I've only got 20 minutes.
leak any information.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only got 20 minutes during the presentation itself, so
Okay.
I can't go into too much detail. But what I'm probably going to be, the angle that I'll be taking is that tools like LangChain kind of let you let you use it as that orchestration layer.
Got it.
So
Got it.
today I can I can build stuff on LangChain using the Google Maker Suite Palm API, and then, or using OpenAI's AI. And then later, it's a really, really small lift to shift from using that to using a different LLM model, or, change my prompt, or change something else. It's that LangChain is providing much of that orchestration work for us. And when we need to change out parts, we can just change out parts. At least that's what I hope I'm going to be saying.
Your concept of LangChain being an orchestrator, right? That can help an enterprise scale, is one, again, that, and I can't remember whether we said this, we were talking about this before the show started recording or not, but things are evolving at a rapid clip. It's so fast that being able to sort of say, okay, there's this new thing that is now performing based on benchmarks that we need to try because we've hit
Right.
our ceiling on the thing, and having a Llama index or a LangChain to help orchestrate, just breaking out of the sandbox of one ecosystem into another is is very important. It's something that MLOps folks, we've been doing, at least advocating for a very long time. So glad it's coming over.
No, I'm, at least I like to think that that's how people will be using LangChain more and more. Whether they are or not, I don't know. I know it's certainly how I try to use it.
Interesting. So it's funny, we all often, you and I, sort of find ourselves in these sort of orthogonal sort of positions.
You're being kind there.
I know I find LLMs in production contexts to be slow, and then prompt chaining. I mean, I should say, not to bash LangChain, it's an impressive product, and what you're doing with LangChain JS is
but there are problems with. I mean,
it's a top heavy language, and if I just want to just use, I just need variables or like just certain patterns in there. It comes with all of this other baggage, and I find chaining to be a non-starter for what I'm going to be talking about, and we can get into that later. But just
so I think we could have another show about the problems with
tough.
LangChain. We could probably have several other shows about the problems of LangChain. But I want to hear what you're talking about.
Oh, well,
well,
as one does. I had a thought that I tweeted back in January. That tweet got some traction. Back then, it was actually called tweets. That tweet got some traction. That tweet turned into a blog post that Towards Data Science, a major publication, asked me to publish on. That went, at least for me, viral. And so the topic of my talk is generative AI, or GPTs generally, is an unreliable information store and what we can do about it. I wrote that as a blog post. It did really well. But at the time, back in February, when, leading up to that, I mean, I was reading as many white papers as you do, or whoever, like, over a coffee, whatever. And I didn't really know what was coming, right? Things have happened so fast at a dizzying pace that we forget that generative AI entered popular parlance only 6 months ago.
9 months ago. It's less than a year.
Certainly less than a year, right? And so this is basically the next evolution. So tweet, blog post to a speaking engagement where, I talk about why I actually was motivated to do the talk. At the time in February, there was a whole thing with Bing AI, Bing Chat, for Microsoft getting this new feature of ChatGPT, which everyone was talking about at the time. And I go, oh, wow, that's cool. Wait a second. No, hold the phone. What does that search modality mean? That consumer search modality is a place where people are now used to getting factual information. We've been trained for decades to separate what is sort of clickbaity, and we have these mental models around things that we hopefully, if we're paying attention, we ask ourselves, how do we know this to be true? And when we don't do that, we find ourselves being fooled by misinformation. If it's state driven, it's disinformation or worse, right?
So you're saying you're worried that Bing was putting out results like, here are 5 things that you need to know about what you asked. The third may surprise you.
Full disclosure, I had no idea what Bing Chat was going to be because it hadn't launched when I wrote this. What I was cautioning against in that post was that should Google and Microsoft and any other search engine want to sort of incorporate a stochastic, non-deterministic system as part of the interface with humans, it better be accurate. It better provide attribution, because we're in for a world of hurt if we just trust these systems to spew out. And then a month later, a lawyer used ChatGPT to spew out, fake
to create fake.
information. So So information store is sort of, unreliable information store is sort of, the reason for this talk to be, I guess.
So 6, 7 months down the road from when you first published your article, and now we Bing chat's out there, Bard is now out there. What are you, without spoiling your presentation,
Yeah.
what are you seeing? What is, are we, have people heeded your warning or not?
Well, I'm a nobody, so thank you. I appreciate the flattery. Um, I think it's become a customer experience problem, a UX problem, a user experience problem, a CX problem, in how generative AI is used for search modalities, at least for information stores,
Yes.
right? So you look at Bing Chat, it's a completely different kind of modality. It's just a question answer system with attribution. I was actually kind of impressed when it came out at the time. But you'll notice what Bard is doing, which is basically a ChatGPT sort of analog, and what Google's whatever they call it, the SGE, the new search
Yeah.
experience. Yeah, the generative experience for search, you'll notice how different that experience is. And so to answer your question quite succinctly, because I've learned I talk too much, talk in circles sometimes, it's a CX problem and a user experience problem, maybe a human computer interaction problem that could help feign reliability with users. And by that I mean Google generates Google is very smart with when it gives you a direct generative AI driven answer, and when it returns with relevant links as part of that new generative search experience. And I think that is a great compromise. And I'm not saying that because I used to be a GDE or not at all. In my blog post, I was eviscerating Google. They had just
I'm a
jumped.
GDE and I eviscerate Google all the time. That's
Yeah.
that's normal for us.
And again, I'm a nobody, so who cares, right? But yeah, it's just, I thought it was irresponsible. I still think it is. I don't think search is the right place for generative AI, but here we are. And so in this talk, I actually pivot because I don't work in an industry that builds consumer-facing applications as much as I used to. And so my focus is, because if you can't beat them, join them. I run a consulting firm, and I'm also part of a larger technology consulting firm working for the government and for some commercial customers. And so I'm going to be sharing a framework that I came up with for my personal consulting side of the house, and how mid-sized enterprises, in my case, sort of think through, all the guardrails, all of this multi-layered set of systems that need to be in place in order to get consistency and reliability out of their systems, right? Whether the task is semantic search, an agent combined with retrieval augmented generation, agent meaning like an API call, being able to validate things that are not in a database already. Whatever the permutation of the thing is, the key takeaway that anyone should have after my talk is that we're all aware, like all the crypto bros became generative AI experts, right? There's a lot of hype seen around LLMs, and I see impressive demos. Yes, I even create some of them. Perhaps not as impressive, but those demos will fall over the instant anyone try to use them for an enterprise grade task.
Yes.
Right. At least if their jobs depended on it.
So I think it's interesting. You and I are tackling the how to scale this for the enterprise from two very different angles.
Different angles. And it's what makes us Noble and Alan, right? Like it's been like that since Google Glass days, like over a decade ago.
It's been that for 10 years. Yeah. Which actually leads to the third thing that that we'll be doing at Voice+AI, and that's that you and I will be recording a session of Two Voice Devs live and in person during the Wednesday session at 1 o'clock, the lunch hour,
Right.
folks we will be able to join us and ask us questions. And
Live studio audience, kidding.
well, I mean, it's a live participatory audience. It's going to be great, because I'm looking forward to seeing what people ask us, and more interestingly, how in the world you and I answer.
Right.
Because we're coming at this from some very different points of view,
Right.
which will be fun, I think. So I'm looking
It will be
forward
fun.
to that.
And at the end of the day, for some reason, regardless of how parallel our thoughts are or whatever it is, it all ends up with, and spoiler alert, it depends.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It's like, it depends on what you're trying to do. Like, what is your goal? There's no right answer, especially with an emergent
Especially
type
that.
of.
But also I think it's important for us to be raising these issues and having these discussions, so that somebody who thinks they've got the right answer, can now say, well, maybe there's another approach and maybe it's better, and I need to think about it.
Yeah, this is exciting. I can't wait till next week.
So I think it's going to be a fantastic event. I hope folks can join us. If not, I'm sure you and I will be talking about it and summarizing it afterwards. And, I'd love to hear what folks want to know. If you've got questions that you hope would be answered by a conference like this, what are your questions? What answers are you looking for? And we'll try to find the right people to take them to. And, find us on social media. LinkedIn, I think, is a good place for both of us.
All right.
Comments below, and we will hopefully have some answers for you on a future episode of Two Voice Devs. Have a great week, Noble. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me again.